Oh. Okay, now I notice I'm going live with the big green light that's on my camera. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's 9 a.m. for our weekly Facebook Live. This is Andrea coming to you from the Quilting Shed in Fredericton. And I was reminded last week that I probably should mention that because I'm starting to get viewers that are not local, which is great, and who don't even know me, which is also great. I'm going to say that's great. Should be great. It's supposed to be great. It's a good thing I'm kind of used to this. I had a previous career where people would come up to me at conferences and be super friendly and act like they know me and no clue who they were. They were just familiar with my online life. So that's something I've had to get used to again because for a couple years didn't have to deal with that anymore. So today's mug, I don't have a funny t-shirt, but I do have a mug. We were unpacking yet more crap. And in my house, we have his mugs and her mugs. He drinks coffee, I drink tea, and if you're a long-time coffee or tea drinker, you know if you use the wrong mug, it doesn't taste the same, even though it's clean. Nobody wants coffee tasting tea. Trust me on this one. So, long time ago, this is super funny. Long time ago, I used to have a tiny little craft store in my house. Back when I thought I knew everything. Oh, I'll start a business. I have 3 small kids at home. We started homeschooling. Let's start a business. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, let's do mail order when things like Amazon barely exist and nobody's shopping online. Let's try it. Just see what happens. Because I lived out in the country and nobody wanted to keep running into the city, and everybody was like, well, why don't we go in on, buying some of our craft supplies, mail order, and people were like, but I don't want to pay shipping. And I'm like, well, if I can get it cheap enough and sell it to you, then I started a business. So, of course, my last name is Rennick, so we called it the ever popular Rennick Craft Supplies. Made up a jingle too. Rennick Craft Supplies. So my husband had also started a consulting business because he is a computer programmer. And we had to think of a name for it. So we called it Rasm Software with Ron, Andrea, Addison, Sarah, and Megan, which if you know our family, there is a child missing here at the end. This was before Emma was born. It's like we had an entirely different life. Then Emma come along, and we'll talk about things from the past, and Emma will be like, I have no idea. This was before me. I didn't exist, remember? So this is our Rennick Craft Supplies Rasm Software mug, and you can see how faded it is because it is 25 years old. Wow. Geez, yeah. 25 years old, holy. So all of we ordered like 200 of these. So every member of our family ever, all aunts, uncles, grandparents, everybody we know has one of these in their cupboard somewhere. If my daughter-in-law is in the comments, she'll come along and say, yeah, we have one of these. We have one of these. Sure, my mom does. Where is my mom? My mom hasn't even shown up yet. Jeez, people. Where are you this morning? Anyway. So that's the story of this. So I feel like now running the quilt shop, I actually know what I'm doing because I know what not to do. All that stuff I did last time. Also, I kind of have another sinus headache because of the weather. And we had a guild meeting, one of the guild meetings last night, one of the bigger guilds I'm in, so they run a little later. And we had a special guest speaker. And I was very excited because I got to hang out because it was Kelly from the Silly Moon Quilting Company, who, as you will know, I carry their rulers. So far I am the only shop on the East Coast to carry their quilting rulers, which is super awesome. She's super nice. So yeah, Canadian product, Canadian made and manufactured, and that is very, very, very important. Look, there's my mom. I'm sewing on the second binding. My mom has binding questions, so thank you to my mom for asking about binding because I am going to talk about how to do your binding. So maybe hold off on the sewing for a second, Mom. Go refresh your tea. So yeah, I was going to talk about the quilting rulers first because we had Kelly from Silly Moon. She did a presentation, really awesome, combination slides and hands-on work. And I know my follow-up question, which I didn't ask in the guild, I will ask her privately because not everybody needs to know this, is where the heck does she put her camera and what kind of mount does she use? Because she had a really good bird's eye watch me quilt sort of setup, and I just desperately need to know that so that I can show you stuff that I'm doing on my sewing machine. So there's this little dude guide, which sadly is not showing on my site yet because I kind of got stuck. But she showed us how these little dudes work, which is great. So one of the things she did when she sent me my order was she sent me some rulers for me to play with, like this big, huge, edgy one. See, they are etched. They're etched really well. I have a long arm that I use these on, so they're very thick. The ones for domestic, you usually have to check. You usually use the thinner one. I can help you figure that out. And the deal we usually have going on is if you buy the edgy or the cheese or the charming, you can take a quilting class from her, a beginner ruler quilting class from her for free. You buy them from me, you can take the class from her, everybody's happy. You'll get going with like all kinds of stuff. You'll be totally hooked. You'll have a ruler collection like me. It'll be crazy. We'll have a good time. But yeah, this and they're good for your hand. You can hold them really nicely. She showed us why the rulers have these little things at the end. They're like bumper stoppers for stopping your foot, your ruler foot. The curve's the same. So you can just do that exact line every single time. You don't even have to mark it or measure it. It's insanely helpful. I mean, there are all these other lines that you use to line things up with seams. And once you get going, super great. And every bit comes with the sandpapery type tape that you can put on your rulers so that when you are using them on a domestic, you got this in the bottom of your ruler and you put it on the fabric side. You just move that ruler and your whole piece moves for you because you know you want to have that nice and slidey. And if you've ever done it, sometimes it feels like it's hard to grip. That's why you've got your gloves. I don't like the gloves, but that's the don't do what I do kind of thing. So yeah, I was really excited about her talk. This is the eggy number one. This is super tiny, I know, but look at this little curve you could do. Like if you had to do like little tiny clamshells with this. That's how you do those super neat clamshells. Nobody's doing them freehand, not even me. Come on now. But you know, you line things up, and you use the same line every time, and you bump across your thing like this or like that. And boys, oh boys. Yeah. So Maxine, you'd like to learn how to use the rulers? You buy one, and you get signed up for the class. I will leave details in the comments later. I hit the ground running this morning and tried to get up early, but time not working so well for me this morning, so I don't have the links ready to go before I talk, which is what I aim for. We're not going to talk about that as a total huge failure. No. But one of the weirdest looking ones is this turkey, which is, if you go to Silly Moon Quilting Company, look on Facebook, look on Instagram, type it into Google, Silly Moon Quilting Company. She has a whole website and she links out to all her social media, but you can, and she has a YouTube channel too. What? I know. So you can see her using these rulers and the amount of things you can't, you can do more than one thing or one design with a ruler, especially like this one. I mean, even like this one, like, oh, just do ovals and curves. Nah, it's all about how you put them together. And when you start using them in tandem with all the stuff you already know, it's, like Ron came around at one point and watched some and he was like, oh my God, cool. I'm like, I'm telling you, Ron, if you start using these, I'm never going to see my long arm again. Swear to God, if he gets into it, I'm going to be a little ticked. So anyway, I got them. You can see them on my site. If you don't have a ruler foot, I have some ruler feet from Westerly. They come in high, medium, and low shank, and that's what I was going to get. Where'd I put them? I'll be right back. Now, these ones come with a default ruler, and yeah, it's just acrylic with the curve and things. So that's basic. It'll get you pretty far. Good morning, Tanya. That is a wild and crazy. I love the names that she comes up with them too. Like there's one ruler called a jelly, and I was like, why is it called a jelly ruler? And then I was like, wait a second. It's the perfect width for quilting on jelly roll strips once they are sewn in. So everything you quilt with this ruler is like a 2-inch distance. So yeah, a ruler foot looks basically like this. It's got this nice, it's round, but it's got this really, really thick. It's really, really thick. So your ruler can bump up around up to it. It's not going to slide under. It's not going to slide over. And it's not going to basically get sewn on under your needle and completely wreck your machine. You absolutely need a ruler foot to sew with rulers. Don't try it without it. You'll break something. This is from the voice of experience talking. This is usually how I learn things. So see, I said, don't do what I do. Don't do that. Got to use a ruler foot. These will fit almost any machine. There's a few that it's somewhat picky. Sometimes there is, see, it's not just a single hole. There's kind of like a range, and they do that because maybe the screw hole won't go right there. I know I have one of these, but I use it on multiple machines. And I just have to make slight adjustments so it's not completely touching the bottom. You need to get your fabric under there when it's on, so you do sort of adjust them when you put them on your machine too. It's a bit of a learning curve, but once you have it, you're good to go. I don't have any examples to show you. I don't think, did I use these here? I might have. So if you see on this piece, maybe I did use this ruler I just forgot about. These little curves here, you can use a ruler, yeah, to line up and get that curve perfect every time. Sometimes I do these freehand, these little curves in the square, but you could use a ruler like this to, there we go, to help you get that curve consistent every single time. You just move around, move around. Okay, so that's it for the rulers because I've gone on long enough. I think maybe 12 minutes in. Yeah, it's probably long enough. So if you're trying to find them on my site, if you go right to thequiltingshed.com, you'll see the big pictures at the top, and it's a slider and the pictures change. You can cycle through the pictures. One of them will say Silly Moon Rulers. I have a picture of the rulers. You click on that, and you will see all the rulers that I have in stock. So the other important thing I was going to say is I am going to be putting in another order for more rulers, of course, because I only have some of what she carries. So if you are on her site and you see some rulers that you want, let me know within the next week. I will bring them in. And the good thing about small companies is you can order like small amounts of things, which is great. I don't have to get like 12 of everything, which is awesome because that is a lot to get. So yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring more ruler work too when I get some time. Yeah. So the other thing, I was like, I don't know if I want to not come on today because nothing's come in that's new. Nothing's come in at all. I do have a couple orders on their way. They're like back orders. Right. Yeah. One of the things I have on the way is Star Wars fabric that is specific to The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. So if you know anybody who's been watching the latest Star Wars TV series, fabric's coming for that. Baby Yoda is adorable. I was like, I gotta get it. Our house is not a Star Wars house. If you are in the geek space genre and you like these sorts of things, one thing we've discovered, it's Star Wars or Star Trek. Never the twain shall meet. You like one or the other. Most people that I've met, it's one or the other. They're not in fandoms of both of them. It's just, but our house, dead Trekkie. Sorry. I appreciate the Star Wars stuff. I can appreciate it, but my fandom lines with the Trekkies. So, but I did get the Baby Yoda, so because it was available. Like, hello, it's probably gonna sell pretty good. So, yeah, Baby Yoda's coming is my point. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me what Star Spacey kind of TV thing you're into. I know sometimes people ask for Doctor Who, and I keep meaning to talk about licensed fabric. Yeah, so one of the things is that's not a thing that they constantly keep in print. So shops have to get it when they see it because it's not like a blender or something or a solid that's consistently available, because I'll have like Do you have Toronto Maple Leafs fabric, for example? You can't always get that. Like even the if it's licensed, it's going to come from just specific suppliers, not any of them. Not like I need black fabric. Well, you can order that anywhere. Or it's like I need baseball fabric that's generic. Lots of people have baseball fabric and mostly available. But when you get to the specific sports teams and things that are licensed, as in they're charging people money to be able to use their logos on things, that's when it gets tricky. It's like the Star Wars fabric, that would be licensed fabric, so I grabbed it when I saw it. Yeah, maybe I should take a tea break. Solar system fabric I do, and luckily that's not licensed because speaking of space, I mean, here I am talking about space, so that's the most obvious, space fabric. I should get some space. I'm writing that down actually, because I have another supplier that I need to order some fabric from. I'm still working. She has like a lot of novelty type fabrics and fabrics with specific things on it. So I was like, I should look for space fabric. She has a lot of baby panels, which is one of the things, and I have an itchy nose, which is one of the things people ask for. So another thing that people ask is questions. And my mom had a binding question. So she's got a quilt and she's trying to bind. She hates binding. She's not the only one. Lots of people, like one of the ladies in the guild last night when we got to the show and tell part, she's like, I finished this quilt 4 years ago. I got it quilted 4 years ago and it's sat there ever since for 4 entire years because I didn't want to do the binding. A lot of people really hate binding. Some people love it. Some people love it. So my mom has a friend that will do the hand stitching for her. And I don't know as I hate binding, but let's just say it's my least favorite step and I tend to let it pile up. And then I will bind like 6 different projects at once. And then it looks like I did a lot, but it really just sat there. You remember another video, I just showed you like 3 or 4, 5 or 6 table runners and things, and all finally bound together, and usually all in the same fabric and or thread color combinations. Because I mean, why change your machine 5 or 6 times when you could just change it 2 or 3 times and do everything you need in that gray thread or brown thread at once? See, I like to batch my stuff. So my mom was asking about binding, and because she doesn't do it so often, she had questions like, what do you do? And how big is the seam allowance? And how large do you cut these things? So just to go over the basics, when you're doing the straight grain binding, most of the time this is all you're doing. You're cutting a strip of fabric, selvage to selvage, just like if you were cutting strips out for your blocks. You're cutting a 2.5 inch wide strip. Conveniently, the same as a jelly roll. Yes, you can bind with jelly roll strips, which is an awesome scrappy look. So 2.5 inch wide, cut them straight across the grain. Trim off those salvages. I do like to join them on the bias. Join them on the bias. Here we go. Because that's less bulk in your binding. I do see people do this on really wide borders, and it kind of annoys me because, well, it reduces bulk. I'm like, it's a 10-inch wide border. You don't have to do that. It's not going to be bulky there. And it's sometimes on that big, people get it off, so then their border's off. So I will talk about borders another time, I swear. So then you sew it onto the edge of your quilt, and I'm going to assume, a mother, that you've squared up your quilt, so you know the edges are nice and square here against your trimming ruler that you've got nice and square. Sometimes if you've basted along the edge, or your long armor has, these seams may or may not wind up a perfect 1/4 inch from the cut edge. So that's the other reason why you have to square. So you can't always go by that little stitched line when you get your quilting back. So I machine bind, so I apply it to the front first and then flip it over to the back. Actually, no, I don't. I did this wrong. Ha! I did this as if you're going to hand sew it, but I only did a short seam that I'll take out later. So you're welcome, Mom. Talk about squaring up the quilt. You put it down on your cutting table. Let's say this had a raggedy edge. You get one of your big square rulers. I have a blog post about this somewhere. And you line up the squares so that this is a right angle, and you trim off any extra. My mom's helping me come up with a whole list of things to do tutorials on. But after I talked to the lady from Silly Moon and say, how'd you do that camera setup so that I can start doing all these videos and cranking them out and showing people. So Mom, what you're gonna do is you're gonna sew your binding on like this. You're gonna match up that cut edge, all the cut edges, see? That is a 1/4 inch seam and not a scant 1/4 inch seam. This is closer to 3/8 of an inch. So it's a nice, but not too chunky. You don't want it like a 1/2 inch or anything. And this is my folded 2.5 inch strip, and it's pressed. So I've got my nice 1/4 inch seam, and see, it's nice and even and consistent. I want it nice and even and consistent all the way down. You don't want it wobbling back and forth. In some places it's skinny, in some places it's really fat. You just want it nice and consistent. You might have to sew slower. You can see here there's a pressed line because I pressed it with my finger. This is the fold. When we start folding, we're just going to gently fold it. We're not going to pull it super tight, and we're not going to pull it super tight around the back. That's not what we're going for. We're not going for super tight. We're going for nice and flat and even. So we flip it up this way, and I usually press this. And see, you can even see in this spot right here, there's a little line of stitching that's didn't get caught. That's perfectly fine. So when we take it the other way, my handy shelf here, see? We've got our, yeah, you can see that seam right there. See, Mom? You can see that seam right there. And we've got our nice fat, don't trim this. Don't trim this because you've already trimmed it. It's nice and square. And then we're just going to gently fold, and we'll meet this folded edge of your binding. Should just touch or just cover that line of stitching. So that when you do that, it's nice and even and the same width the entire way around your quilt. And then when you flip it over the other side, it's also the same width the entire way around your quilt. And when you feel it, you are going to feel spots where maybe it's not quite full, which is fine, because even in quilt shows where they're judged, they don't get that completely full, because you don't want it to look like it's overstuffed either. That's not the aim. You're just covering up the raw edges. Just nice and gentle, tucking them in here. We're not like tying them down so they don't go anywhere for the night. No, just nice and gentle and even. Going for even and consistent. Does that help, Mom? Hope so. Because the only way I can do this better is to actually film that video, and already the list is very long. So on later I will hunt down the Squaring Up the Quilt blog post that I wrote on my old blog. So hope that's clear as mud for you. But yeah, you can see even with, so this will be on the other side. This is on this side, and that's on the inside. And these are almost even. They're not off by a lot. But it's like, this is almost divided into thirds. Because up here we need to have a bit of allowance for how thick the quilt is. So there. And because other people don't know this is called a double fold binding, because by the time it goes over the fold, it's got a double layer of fabric. You don't need to worry about single fold yet. And that's straight grain. You don't have to worry about bias binding most of the time. All right, I had a finished sample. So see, if you see on this little one, the binding all the way around is a nice and even, consistent, same, identical, almost width. And it's the same on the back. See, just nice, same, even. And if you feel you can feel like some of the edges, it's not completely it's got some space in there that's like, I can feel the edge of the quilt is right there. And then there's a little bit left over. That is fine. That is absolutely what you want, unless you're getting your quilt judged in a show. Just don't worry about it. So that's all the straight grain. You never have to worry about the bias binding unless you are doing something like this. If I want to keep all these pointy edges and go up and down these angles and all these little folds, which honestly I have done, and it is not some people's ideas of fun. The other reason you would use bias binding is someone emailed me a picture the other day of a gorgeous, drop dead gorgeous, vintage double wedding ring quilt top. Oh my God. And she said, what do I do with these edges? How do I add a border to this? Because they're all, they're curved, and then they've got these points where the curves meet. And I was like, you don't add a border to this. You bind it. After you're done quilting, you bind all those curves and corners, and you have to use the bias binding, because that's how the straight grain won't go around those curves, and it'll be easier to handle all those angles. Handle the angles, you hangle them. So yeah, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to show you a video on how to do that too. I'm just gonna start calling my channel Blame It On My Mom. There's a laugh from the other room. Or just like, thanks, Mom, for giving me this idea. Mom asked a question. Here's the video answer. Do I get Best Daughter of the Year award then?
Tea with Andrea and Diane.
Tea with it. I have been threatening. I have been threatening to do this. I told them last time. If you didn't hear my husband, he came in and said, tea with Andrea and Diane. We might actually get to the quilting, but I have threatened to do a video with my mom, which will have to be pre-recorded, because no way she's showing up here 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, all the way from Hatfield Point. She'll probably have to leave the next day. She gets up earlier than I do. She could do it. We'd have to be ready to go, because we can't speak to each other before tea. High school's a blur. She's laughing, I know it. So, those were the only 2 things on my list. Oh my God, look at that. No, 3. Space fabric. Baby Mandalorian. Also, so I've occasionally talked about I'll order a bunch of Kona solids, and every so often the back orders happen. That's fine. But every so often we'll get an email. It's like, oh, these 2 are showing up now. Oh, okay. So this time, this week, we got one, and Ron gets the emails too, because he's the money man. That's what we learned from last time. Let him manage the money. It's the only way to go. Karen says she sews the binding on the back first and does a decorative stitch on the front. Yes, when I'm machine binding, I sew it on the back first and flip it over and stitch down on the front. There's a few tricks you can use. I actually did mean to say few and not other words. Decorative stitching is one. There's like if your machine has a blanket stitch, it looks really nice when you top stitch that binding down on the front side. I have one where it was really easy, where I put in a little flange. So when I top stitch, the flange sticks out, and you just get in the ditch of the flange seam. And it looks super difficult, but it's actually easier than normal stuff. The blanket stitch, there's like a feather stitch that you can do, so it hits both. I know some people, when they're doing kids quilts, the machine binding is actually really good for kids quilts, because the hand stitches, sometimes they'll come out. And kids are really hard on things. I don't know if you notice that, but they are. So you machine stitch the heck out of that binding, and the decorative stitches really work well, especially like a wide zigzag. If you know is like more a utility quilt, they're just going to lug it out in the yard and drag it around behind the dog. And yeah, you got to stitch that sucker down good. It's also a good way to use those decorative stitches on your machine that you might never use, and you go, what the heck is this for? So that's one of the things you can do under lockdown, is look at your machine, get some sample fabric, get those threads you've never tried, dig them all out. You got an hour to kill, or 2, or whatever. Go through your machine and try out all those stitches, and maybe try out all those decorative threads you've never used. It's either going to be, if it's frustrating, you can give it up in 5 minutes, because you're just testing. It's not a project you're working on with a deadline, so no stress. So if you don't like it, boom, move on to the next thing. That's why I like Netflix. If you don't like it, boom, move on to the next thing. It's not like you wasted $5 on a rental. I know, right? We were so stuck for like years. We're like, but we paid for this. I'm like, oh, right, $8 a month. Yeah, we can afford to skip a movie. It's okay. Just don't like leaving things unfinished, which is hilarious. Because in life, I have like 40 unfinished quilt products. But my Netflix movies are watched up. So yeah, you can use your decorative stitches, test them all out. I know when I got my Bernina, when it was new, I went through and I just did a sample of every single stitch, and there's like 140 something. It was insane. And I'm like, I'm never ever going to use this. And I can do the alphabet in like 2 different scripts. I think. And I'm like, oh, this is great for labels. Have I made a label? Never. No. I'll just free motion their name and the year while I'm doing the quilting because I am that lazy. I'm like, sewing on a label is another step. I'm quilting that sucker right into the quilt. I have done that for customers too, usually on their request. I wouldn't do it if they didn't ask, but, or sometimes I'll mention I can do this and they'll be like, oh my God, you can? Yeah, do that. So actually there was one lady who I made a quilt for. This was a few years ago. She was paying me to make a baby quilt for a very special couple who was having a very hard time conceiving. This was the rainbow baby, and I don't know if you know what that means, but it's that finally successful pregnancy after miscarriages and attempts and things like that, which is very sad. So it is, but it is a cause for celebration. So one of the things she wanted me to do was, while I did some straight line quilting across the quilt, every so often there were words that she wanted me to quilt in there while I was doing things. So she had a list of like 12 words, and from her they were sort of like prayers or wishes for this kid, this child, to carry into their life, which was really, really special. Isn't that sweet? And then there's times where I'm like working on a quilt and I'm listening to Rage Against the Machine or watching a zombie show. So sorry if you got one of the quilts with the zombie vibes in it. Not that quilt. Anyway, so that was just another way to do sort of things, is stitch a line, write, creative, artistic, things like that. I rambled. The Advil's wearing off. It's one of those days. I know. And yes, I am tempted to get Quilting Shed mugs, because you can do these easily now. You can order one mug with your own logo now from 20 different places. It's not like you have to go to one place and you have to get 200. I am sorely tempted, and I do have I do have a silhouette machine, so in theory I could do the like cut vinyl and stick on things too, but I haven't got that far because that's one of the things I'm still learning. Right, I was talking about the decorative stitches and all those decorative threads. So yeah, you could go through and do stuff with your machine like that. So that's my other tip. So to recap, I talked about the Silly Moon rulers. My mom wants to know, what do others watch while quilting? The husband hates watching me, so while I have like a little iPad, I have more than one iPad, but I have all these iPad stands everywhere so I don't have to lug them around, and I'll sit my iPad up on the little stand so that I can see it out of the corner of my eye while I'm using my sewing machine, and he can't watch me because I will be sewing and I will keep looking up like this, and he's like, you're gonna sew your finger. I'm like, no, I'm probably gonna sew right here, but not my finger. So yeah, murder mysteries. Mom, there's another season of The Sinner on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's intriguing. It's also creepy. The other thing I like to watch is Korean zombie and or apocalypse dramas. They're dubbed and they have, the captions are always on regardless, but the Korean ones, they're starting to put more dubbed non-English shows on Netflix, and yeah, we'll watch all of those. For a while, Mom and I were both watching all the Scandinavian type murder mysteries. And sometimes they'll make British ones with the same sort of feel. They call them Scandinoirs. It takes them forever to figure out this stuff. There's lots of bleak landscapes and creepy music and dark doorways and sneaking around and little dialogue. I'm like, I think it's Nelson down at the lodge. Nelson? Sven, I just saw Nelson. Are you sure it was Nelson? I'm sure it was Nelson's Sven. So yeah, so this is very intriguing. I saw him at the lodge with an axe. I'm sure my mom's laughing. So yeah, we just like the thing going off in the background. As Mom and I say, was it good enough that I stopped sewing? If it was that good, then we know it was a good show. If you can't sew to it, then it's good. But then I used to not like rewatching shows, but I've taken to rewatching some shows because turns out I pay so little attention the first time around that I'll catch new things on the second time around. At least it'll be familiar. And I'm getting old, so Speaking of getting old, I hear the tractor running. We have ice to clean up. There's orders that have been coming in that I said don't come pick them up yesterday. And there were orders that came in overnight. So I'm going to have to wrap it up and go help clean the driveway and the decks and the walkway. And clean off my car. And then make myself a cup of hot chocolate after that because I'm going to need it. All right. So you guys stay safe. Keep threading your bobbin. And I will see you next time. Okie dokie, bye.